It's always interesting when you go to another church to see what kinds of things there are behind the pulpit. You don't often get a chance to see that, but I'm not sure what these are doing here, but maybe the lights are too bright. And one time at the church that I served, I mean, even sometimes the pastors don't know what's going to be in the pulpit. I remember I came up one Sunday morning, it happened to be Stewardship Sunday, and as I walked up to the pulpit, I noticed there was a machine for processing credit cards. I wondered if God was sending some kind of message to the congregation that we should get out our credit cards. But it's always interesting to see what is there. I invite you to join with me in the scripture reading this morning. It's on page 78 in the New Testament portion of your pew Bibles. It's a passage that you will know immediately, and some of you may even know the plot of it by heart. There's two, the scripture readings are broken up, as you might see, Luke 15, 1 through 3, and then 11 through 32. And I want to read verses 1 through 3 because it sets the context in which this parable is told. And if you notice, just looking over the whole thing, as often happens, there are a number of parables grouped together here. The opening verses, the first three verses, are the setting in which it takes place. And then Jesus tells three parables of lost and found. The same general theme, but each one has a different message to it and a little bit different word for us. So the opening setting, and then there is the parable of the lost sheep, and then the parable of the lost coin, and then the parable of the lost sons. So we're going to read the opening context and then the parable of the lost sons. Luke 15. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, this fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them. And so he told them this parable. Then Jesus said, there was a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me my share of the property that will belong to me. And so he divided his property among them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country, where he squandered his property in desolate living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. And so he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. And so he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion, and he ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. And then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Bring a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead, and now he is alive. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. And he replied, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound." And then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, "Listen, for all of these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I've never disobeyed your command. And you have never even given me a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him." And then the father said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and has been found." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Jack Murphy was a jewel thief. He somehow got the nickname Murph the Surf when he stole the largest sapphire in the world, a 563-carat Star of India, as well as several other precious gems from New York's American Museum of Natural History. Later, he was also convicted of the robbery of a Miami Beach woman and of the murder of Terry Frank, a young secretary. When he was caught, he was sentenced to life in prison in Florida. 6 years later, Murphy converted to Christianity, and his life changed drastically. He started teaching Bible study classes in prison. He worked with the chaplaincy program, and he mentored other men in prison. As he continued this work, his parole date kept moving to an earlier and earlier date. Many people scoffed at his conversion, claiming that this was just an attempt to get out of prison. He couldn't be trusted. He was a con man, and this was just another one of his scams. Some people seemed to resent his change of heart. Lots of people didn't trust him. 12 years after Murphy's conversion, he was released from prison. He began working for chaplain ministry groups, Christian prison ministry groups like Champions for Life and the International Network of Prison Ministries. Several years after his release from prison, he said this: "When I was in prison, I never got letters from the bartenders and the hoodlums and the wise guys that I hung out with. But I got letters from Christians who didn't even know me." Several years later, after he had visited 1,200 prisons, preaching and telling his story, his lifetime parole was lifted. Jack Murphy became an ordained minister. He wrote a book, and a movie was made about his life. 5 years ago, he became the vice president of the International Network of Prison Ministries. Even decades after his release, people did not trust Murphy. Some people dismissed his change of heart. Some who had been hurt by him resented his actions. And several people said, "He's still a thief and a murderer." Jesus tells a story about a young man who destroys his life. He's the younger brother, and he goes to his father and tells him that he wants to have his inheritance in advance. Really what he's saying to his father is, I can't wait for you to die. I want my inheritance money now. And for some reason, the father gives it to him. And he takes off for a distant country. It doesn't take long for him to blow that whole inheritance, and soon he's broke. And that's the time when a severe recession sets in. And now he's got nothing. And so he ends up, picture this if you can, a young Jewish man working for a farmer, standing out ankle deep in slop, feeding the pigs. And he would love to have those pods that he's throwing out to the pigs, but he's not allowed to have them. And maybe when he reaches his most desperate time in his life, Luke says he comes to himself. Wait a minute, he says. The servants on my dad's estate live much better than I'm living. They have food enough to eat and more than that. I'll go back home. Not as a son, but as a hired servant. I'm not worthy to be called his son, but I'll go back and maybe he'll hire me as a worker in the fields. And so he heads for home. And he hasn't even entered his father's property yet when his father sees him coming and comes running out, something that no father in Old or New Testament times would ever do. The father sat and the sons came to him, but this father gets up and runs out to greet his son. And he never gets a chance to give his full speech to his father because the father comes to him and buries him in a huge bear hug. And soon the father is yelling to the servants, bring him the robe, the best one, and bring a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the fatted calf. We're going to celebrate because my son was lost and he is found. He was dead and now he's alive. The son is getting the royal treatment, literally. We read that story and maybe we think to ourselves, that son is me. We mess up, sometimes big time. And God not only lets us back, but he runs out to meet us and gives us the royal treatment. Apparently our coming back home is that important. This is a powerful story that ends in a great celebration. Except that it doesn't. You know, the story doesn't end there. You know there's more to it. Because the father has an older son. And the older brother is coming in from working in the fields, and he hears this music and dancing going on. And he's wondering what in the world is happening. So he calls over a servant, and he said, what's all the celebration about? What's the big party for? And the servant says to him, your brother has come back. Your dad has killed the fatted calf, and everybody is celebrating because your brother is back safe and sound. Maybe the older brother didn't know about his brother's return because he was out working so hard in the fields. But when the brother hears this, the older brother hears this, he crosses his arm and curls his lip and grits his teeth. If he doesn't say it out loud, he's at least feeling it. Really, a big party for this loser brother who insults my father, takes his money, and messes up his life in desperate living. My brother came back home because he was desperate. He was starving to death. That's why he came crawling back. And for that, he gets a huge bash. His resentment is palpable. maybe we know how he feels. Meanwhile, the father hears that his older son is angry and refusing to come to the party. And so the father leaves the party and goes out to his son. Notice that now the father has to go out a second time from his house for one of his sons. This time for his older son. And now, instead of the younger son pleading with his father, it is the father who is pleading with his older son. Please come in, he says. Celebrate with us because your brother has come back home. And then those words from the older brother. Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. But you've never even given me a young goat that I could have a party with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who blew your inheritance on wild living and prostitutes, you kill the fatted calf for him. And then the father quietly says, son, you are always with me. And everything that I have is yours. But we have to party because this brother of yours was dead and now he's alive. He was lost and now he's found. You probably noticed that the older brother refers to his brother as this son of yours when he's talking to his dad. And the father hears that and responds with, son, and this brother of yours. The older brother is trying to distance himself from his younger brother, but his father reminds him that they are both brothers. Both young men are his sons. It may be that we see ourselves in that older brother too. We see ourselves probably in the prodigal son, the younger brother. We know that we've messed up and we have come back to God and felt warmly received. But maybe there's a part of us that is that older brother as well. I mean, even as we hear his story, we may be feeling the resentment that the older brother felt. When the lost are found, sometimes they are treated better than we are. Many of us are the good, faithful older brother. We keep our noses clean. We are responsible, faithful people. We go to church regularly. We are faithful in what we do. And the truth is, we are the ones that make things happen. So where's the party for us? All this attention being paid to people who aren't doing very well, who mess up big time. But what about us? We stayed home and we worked hard. Where's my hug? Where's my ring? And my sandals? And why aren't I wearing the best robe? Maybe we have felt like that faithful, like the faithful, helpful people are overlooked, while special attention goes to those who have made a mess of things. Remember the context in which this parable is told. It's very important. Jesus has been teaching, and a lot of tax collectors and other sinners are flocking to hear him. And in that scene, the opening of this passage, there is Jesus sitting at table, eating and laughing with those tax collectors and sinners. And they have some serious discussions. And standing just off a little ways are the scribes and the Pharisees, the religious leaders. And they are standing there huffing their disapproval. They see themselves as good, faithful, responsible people. And they grumble, this guy welcomes sinners and eats with them. They look down their noses. Jesus is celebrating with those losers. They are the older brothers standing outside the celebration, grousing about the party for the lost who are coming home. It's pretty easy for us to enjoy the parable of the prodigal son as long as we center on the younger brother. It's a fantastic story of God's forgiving love and acceptance of us. It is all about God's great grace. It's a powerful and important story, and we thank Jesus for giving it to us. If we see ourselves as good, religious, loyal, responsible people, the second part of the story might be more difficult. Do we resent the attention given to those who have turned their lives around? Do we feel overlooked because we have stayed home and worked hard? Do we wonder where the party is for us? The important message is that the second part of this story about the older brother is also about God's great grace. The father goes out to his older son as he has gone out for his younger son. He says, all that is mine is yours. He welcomes his son, begs his son to come in and join the party. And one of the unique aspects of this parable is that we never know whether that older son ever came in and joined the party or not. Both parts, the younger brother and the older brother, both parts of this story are about God's grace. Both parts are about a distant son being welcomed home. One comes home. The other, we don't know about. Amen.